Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over potential tropical storm Sally, which could impact parts of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana over the next couple of days. We're going to be going over that as well as some of the National Hurricane Center forecast, some of the model guidance, and then also we're going to look at the very favorable environment that this storm will go into. So let's start it off here with your current National Hurricane Center or your National Weather Service page. We have some air quality alerts all throughout parts of California, Idaho, Oregon, and parts of Washington State there. And then we also have some dense smoke advisories in this kind of yellow for parts of Nevada, California, Oregon, and Washington there. We also see some of those dense fog advisories for parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, as well as for parts of Illinois, Kentucky, and Missouri. We also see some heat advisories for parts of southwestern Louisiana there. We have over the western part of Florida, we have some flood watches for potential tropical storm Sally. Currently, it's a tropical depression. We also see some of those tropical storm watches and tropical storm warnings in effect off the shore of parts of Florida there. So we do have quite a bit going on with the National Weather Service. Let's start looking at the National Hurricane Center and what that is showing. Now, we currently have Tropical Depression 19 there, and we also have Paulette and Renee. We're going to go a little bit in depth on all of those systems, but we're going to start off with these areas to watch. Now, that yellow region to the west of Tropical Depression 19 currently has a 30% chance of developing within the next 5 days, so a fairly low chance. We have that red region south of Renee, which currently has a 90% chance of developing within the next 5 days, and then we have that orange region, which has a 60% chance of developing within the next 5 days as well. So we have a fairly decent bunch of systems that are out in the Atlantic that all of them have at least a chance of forming, and I would say the two closer to Africa probably have the better chance of developing, especially that red one. Looking at some of the model guidance, some of those models bring this to a Category 3 hurricane, and that's just by the time it's reaching the Caribbean. So who knows what this system could bring, and I'll definitely be covering that on my channel. So let's start it off here with Tropical Storm Renee, which currently it's located at 22.5 degrees north by 43.5 degrees west, maximum sustained winds of about 40 miles per hour, moving northwest at 14 miles per hour currently. And something that really surprised me is that the system really stalled out and was very, very slow. So what actually ended up happening is that you could have a ridge that built in on top of the system in the time that it was still further to the south. So you ended up having the system, at least forecast, to kind of make a curve further to the west, and then most likely it'll curve out later on in the forecast period, most likely not making impact with land, but at this point it's still uncertain. But it looks like it will weaken to a tropical depression probably sometime Monday morning, Atlantic Standard Time. So here is for Tropical Storm Paulette. Currently, it's at 27.2 degrees north by 56.8 degrees west. Maximum sustained winds of about 70 miles per hour, and it's moving northwest out at 16 miles per hour here. So it is a fairly strong tropical storm, about to become a hurricane soon, and it looks like it's going to stay a hurricane even as it moves into the northern Atlantic. So that's definitely very, very interesting, and it'll still stay very, very strong even as it's moving very far to the north. So let's start looking at Tropical Depression 19 or potential Tropical Storm Sally. It really depends whether that red region, which is south of Renee, forms quicker than this Tropical Depression does. That'll depend on who gets what name, whether it be Sally or I believe Teddy would be the next name. So we'll have to see about that, and that's definitely something that I'll be watching. Now, currently, the storm is doing fairly good on the infrared satellite. The system is kind of enveloped right in here, and on the southwestern and also pretty much the entire southern side of the system and the western side, we're looking at some decent convection that is actually going to flip around, where actually on the northern side of the system the most convection will be found later on. So as it's starting to make landfall, you'll most likely see most of the convection on the northern side instead of the southern side, like it is at right now. So currently this system is located at 25.6 degrees north by 81.1 degrees west. Maximum sustained winds at about 35 miles per hour, moving west at about 9 miles per hour. So it's going very, very slowly, and that'll really enable the system to develop quite rapidly over the Gulf of Mexico, over those very, very warm, rich waters. So let's start looking at the key messages for the system. You can pause the video right here and read them if you are curious. So here is the cone of uncertainty for this storm. It is expected to become tropical storm by 2 a.m. Sunday Eastern Time, and it will stay as a tropical storm. I think within probably as it's paralleling parts of the Panhandle, Florida, it'll most likely by about Sunday night, maybe Monday morning. I think that's when it'll turn into most likely a hurricane. National Hurricane Center is playing it down right now, but I do think it may actually become a Category 1 hurricane, or at least nearing Category 1 strength. It has very, very favorable environment with it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it does become a hurricane. Now, we do have tropical storm watches in effect for parts of the Panhandle of Florida there, but other than that, no watch is currently in effect. Now, here is the model track guidance for the storm, and most of the models have this impacting anywhere from Florida to southeastern Louisiana. If you guys are wondering, Laura actually tracked further to the west over the southwestern side of Louisiana and also southeastern parts of Texas. So this part of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama was fairly untouched from Laura. So luckily, the same area isn't getting hit twice with two big or potentially big systems. So luckily, it is impacting a different area, and luckily, the storm does not look like it's going to be as major as Hurricane Laura. Now, here is the model intensity guidance for the storm. It is expected to become a tropical storm most likely within the next 12 to about 24 hours or so. Most of these models have this as a tropical storm. I believe almost all of them, and I would say probably around 1/3 of the models or so bring this to a Category 1 hurricane. Even 2 of them bring this to a Category 2 hurricane. So we definitely have a lot of upside with this system, and it definitely could have a lot of potential, and whether it'll reach that potential or not, that's what we still have to figure out. Now, here is the tropical storm force wind speed probabilities, and we are looking at probably around a 60% chance over parts of southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, and the Panhandle of Florida there. Now, here's your 58 mile per hour wind speed probability, and we are looking at 20 to 30% along southeasternmost Louisiana. And then here's your hurricane force wind speed probability, and we are looking at around 5 to 10% chance of that. Now, something that caught my eye, you actually do have a tornado risk for today for southern Florida because of Tropical Depression 19. You can get a lot of convection with the system, so you definitely could see a couple of spin-ups and maybe some water spouts over southern Florida there. So definitely keep an eye out. If you do get into a tornado warning, definitely take shelter. Now, here is the Weather Prediction Center's forecast rainfall totals from this, and this can really give you a good idea of the track. And on the northern and eastern side of this track, or the northern side of this track is where you're going to see the most rainfall. So I think they're most likely looking at a track that's somewhat like this, like what I drew. So I think they're looking at an impact over parts of southeastern Louisiana, maybe southern Mississippi from the Weather Prediction Center. And if that 6 to 10 inch area continues onto land, then we could potentially see maybe southernmost Mississippi, southeastern Louisiana getting into quite a bit of flooding rains. Now, here would be your flash flood risk from the Weather Prediction Center. We're looking at a 10% chance, a slight risk for much of southern Alabama, southern Mississippi, or the Panhandle of Florida there, and also for the southernmost Florida there. So here is the HWRF model, and I think that's probably the most accurate model, or at least it's aligning most with what I'm thinking the storm is going to do. So I'm going to show you this model, and let's play it through. We're going to go with 12-hour increments, and then we'll slow it down to 6-hour increments as we get closer to landfall. So let's start off here. This would be by Sunday early in the morning, September 13th, and we are looking at some tropical storm force winds by this point, and the greens are tropical storm force winds, and as you get into the purples, that's where you're getting hurricane force wind speeds. So definitely that is kind of that's kind of how you know how intense this hurricane or tropical storm will be. Now here would be this would be by Sunday afternoon, and you are looking at the storm most likely becoming a middle tropical tropical storm, and then by Monday, early in the morning, and you're looking at a hurricane by this point, according to this model. Now, this model does have an impact, most likely for parts of Mississippi and Alabama with its landfall. Now, we are looking at this would be by Monday, as you're waking up, and you're looking at some hurricane force wind speeds offshore of Florida, but mainly onshore. You are looking at probably around 25 to 34 knots, and that would equate to about 30 to 40 miles per hour. So just gusty winds, but nothing that would be too damaging. But by this point, you're starting to see some of the bay and coastal areas getting impacted with some fairly strong winds of about, I would say, tropical storm force or even greater in some locations. And then here would be by Monday, very late in the evening, and we are looking at some potentially high-end tropical storm force wind speeds over parts of southernmost Alabama and southernmost Mississippi there. So let's continue on here. This would be by Tuesday early in the morning, and we're looking at parts of southeastern Louisiana now getting into this, and then you're starting to see those hurricane force wind speeds getting onto land over southern Mississippi and southern Alabama probably by Tuesday morning, and then it starts to dissipate as it moves on land. This would be by Tuesday, probably as you're eating lunch, and then this would be as it's getting onshore. This would be by Tuesday night. So really, as it goes onshore, you're not seeing too many more impacts. So once it makes landfall, it'll quickly decline in its intensity. So something I wanted to point out to you here, this is some of the top 5 analogs or best matching years for the hurricane season. So years that had similar Enzo patterns. Right now we're in a weak to moderate La Nina. So years that had similar patterns actually had quite a bit of activity over parts of this area of the Gulf of Mexico, where Tropical Depression 19 or Tropical Depression, I believe 19, will be going through. So definitely, that is something that I found kind of interesting, and it does go to show you that in years like this, we could definitely we should definitely be on the lookout all throughout this region where you saw above average hurricane and activity throughout these regions. So definitely, if you do live within these regions, definitely be on the lookout for the entire Caribbean, much of the Gulf of Mexico, and also for parts of Central America. So here's your sea surface temperatures, and we are looking at above average for the pretty much the entire Gulf of Mexico, and definitely for the entire track of the storm. Now here's your actual sea surface temperatures, and we are looking at mainly above 30 degrees Celsius, which is around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And now let's start looking at some of the environmental conditions, and I'll play this through a couple of frames. Here by this point would be where the storm is, and we're seeing some wind shear being generated from that, but mainly we're dealing with some easterly wind shear over central Florida and then up through parts of the southeast. And this storm looks to stay to the south of there. So you start to see some of the wind shear that you see here is being generated by the storm, and generally you have weak to moderate wind shear throughout this storm, throughout the storm's lifespan. So really, I don't think that wind shear is going to be a huge factor in this, but definitely something you should pay attention to, and it can really tear apart a system pretty quickly. So we have to watch out for that. So let's start looking at the relative humidity a couple thousand feet up in the atmosphere. Now you see this big purple blob. That would be this tropical depression currently, and you are actually seeing some drier air infiltrate on the western side, and you will start to see that kind of wrap in to the system just a little bit. So that may actually weaken the system just a little bit. And as we play this through, you do start to see that on the western side of the storm, it is battling some drier air, and it would also be battling some wind shear. So as it's nearing landfall, potentially some brief weakening before it moves on land would definitely be possible. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.